everybody, and welcome to What's the Story podcast, WTS 283. My name is Danny Murray.
And I'm Graham Merrigan.
Mero, how are you, my friend?
Good, how are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great. You're looking extremely fresh with your fresh fade.
Fresh haircut, baby.
Look at that. Glorious, man. Glorious. Will the beard be getting a trim now to go along with it?
I know, I'll leave it now. I trimmed it over Christmas and I'll leave that probably till about March, maybe baby paddies.
Nice. Gee, I want some patties.
Yeah.
Lord.
I might trim it in at the sides and keep it a bit tidy, but I feel very fresh and I feel good.
Excellent. You're looking it.
I did have, as you're well aware, I had a rash for the last 2 weeks. A vasculitis rash, which I thought was sepsis and meningitis. Obviously, I can't feel my legs, so I was worried to death about what the hell it was, and it turned out it was a vasculitis. That's what it was.
Oh yeah, you got
Vasculitis
there, man.
rash. So I was on steroids for about 7 days, and the steroids was an interesting development. I've never been on steroids before, and it was fucking mad.
Hang on. You've never been on steroids before.
No, I haven't. No, you're getting PEDs mixed up with steroids, man. I've been on PEDs.
Okay, very well. I was going to say we won't mention the build up to Rio 2016 again.
Yeah, Cocoa Pops.
So you and Hulk Hogan are on the vitamins, and everything's working.
Man, it was 4 a.m. and it might as well have been 4 p.m. I was staring at the ceiling. It was mental. Have you ever been on steroids?
No, I don't believe I have actually.
Dan, it's mad. Like, it's a mad feeling, and your taste goes, and I don't know if I'd be if there was something wrong with me, I'd be like, yeah, give me the steroids, because I'm showing signs of going in the right direction. But having said that, I wouldn't be rushing to take them again. Like, it's just a mad buzz in your body, like.
You see, you won't be injecting them into your left arse cheek to grow them pecs a bit more.
No, absolutely not. I had to take 6 every morning, and I'd rather get rid of them.
So that's only half the Ultimate Warrior's dose.
I know. Put them in my flute.
But you're feeling better, and your rash is fading away, is it?
I don't feel like I'm 100% just yet, but yeah, I'm getting there. I'm in the right direction.
Glad to hear it.
There was talk of being presented to A&E at one time, so I was up the walls at worry. People close to me do call me Captain Worry, but I don't care.
So you don't do well when there's a potential that there's some sort of ailment.
No, I don't. No.
Yeah. Would you be a hypochondriac?
I don't. No, I don't. No, I'm not a hypochondriac, because a hypochondriac suggests that you have something when you don't. I start getting worried when there's confirmation that I do have something.
Right. Okay, grand.
Do you get me?
I do. No, I understand. Yeah.
A hypochondriac will go to the fucking doctor with a sneeze and think they have corona and bird flu all in one.
Yeah. It'd be very hard to get, to be fair.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. I'm starting to believe that COVID was a hoax, people. Sure, I haven't had it yet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's because you had about 5 or 6 vaccines.
Listen, look at that arm. It's radioactive from the booster.
You had your 4th booster this week, did you?
I did, yeah. Tuesday, I got me latest, my 3rd booster, is it? 3rd or 4th? Whatever the new vaccine is, whatever the new one that covers the new strains of it.
I forget how many I've had.
Yeah, listen, it's they text me and they were like, listen, you're on a list. Do you want one? I said, thanks very much, Mr. Anonymous HSE person.
Yeah.
I'll happily take the 5G in my arm. So yeah, that's me.
And do you have better signal in your phone?
Oddly enough, I do, Graham. Yeah, I do. But I think that's because I moved phone networks more so than that now. But yeah, man, look, I'm all for it. I don't care. Give me a vaccine once a year in my arm. It's not doing any harm to me at all. And as I said, I haven't had COVID. So, I mean, for all I know.
Has your wonderful wife had COVID?
She has. Yeah, she tested.
I remember, yeah.
She tested positive for COVID the day I came home from surgery last summer.
I remember, yeah.
And that's how I'm amazed I haven't had it, because like, she picked me up from the hospital. I was in the car with her for an hour and a half in a confined space, driving home. And Yeah, I never tested positive. I never got it. I had no symptoms or anything. So there's people out there that are probably like, oh, you could have been one of those people that had it, but you just were asymptomatic.
Oh, stop.
Maybe I was. Maybe I
Yeah,
was. I don't
isn't
know.
it? Isn't it? No, I'm not gonna go down that road.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. There's rabbit holes and speed bumps everywhere there, man.
Yeah, I cannot stand those type of people. Anyway,
Should we just go to our guest
you
who
do. So we recorded twice this week, and this is our first one. Little behind the curtain there, but anyway, uh,
let's not
we,
like so hang on, right? We were talking about your beard at the start of this. Now, when I say this man's beard was absolutely
oh, well, we're doing that intro.
yeah.
All
What
right, you do it
you
then.
thought we thought doing the other way.
Yeah.
My bad. Right. Well look, I've set it up now for this, right? So just go with me here for a
Well,
second.
then you go with it.
All
You.
right, no bother, yeah. Right. Look, this episode, lads, right? There's two. You're going to get them both very similar time frames. Don't worry, it's all good. Look, pretend me and Graham didn't just do a quick chat about the organisation of this podcast on the floor, and as if we're a seamless professional outfit that knew what we were doing all along. Our guest this week, speaking of Meryl's beard, this man has a glorious beard.
Mine's looking well now at the moment, isn't it?
It is looking quite good. It is. It
Yeah,
is.
I'm very happy with how it's looking at the moment. Go on, sorry.
But our guest beard was far fuller and dare I say it looked luxurious.
Yeah,
I think it
well
did.
agree. Yeah.
But yeah, we're speaking to Patrick Harding, who is an elite performance coach who has worked and chartered physiotherapist and mental coach, man of many. There's many strings to this man's bow. He currently is working with Formula One driver Alex Albon, who races for the Williams F1 team. He was formerly with Red Bull and Scuderia Toro Rosso, part of Red Bull Academy. F1 is mad. It's mad. It's mad. It's mad. And what it takes to put those drivers in the car and what they have to go through is absolutely incredible. We're going to talk to Patrick a little bit about that. But he's gone to the Olympics. He's been a physio with Team GB at 2 Olympics. He's worked with Arsenal Football Club. He's been a coach to Michael Conlon, to Paul Dunn. This man knows everything there is to know and then some when it comes to coaching elite athletes. And I'm delighted to say that Patrick joins us now. Patrick, thanks for your time, man. How are you keeping?
Yeah, keeping well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So, right, you have a bit of a Ric Flair, jet flying, limousine riding kind of lifestyle at times. So, where are you at the moment?
I can safely say that's the first time in my life I've been likened to Ric Flair, and the 8-year-old WWE fan kind of likes it. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of travel. I mean, it's just getting started now. Just come back from LA from a pre-season training camp, but probably looking at least 31 weeks away this year in terms of schedule. Now that they're not always full weeks, a lot of European races are Wednesday to Sunday, but at least 31 weeks where there's travel involved.
So right, so then we're at the start of February now, right? So
yeah,
for you right now, this is kind of it's pre-season with Alex Albon. So Williams have their car launch next week.
Yes.
Do you have to have Alex in race suit trim, making sure that he's looking sharp? Like what's going on now? Like,
yeah, no, good question. He enjoys himself, or he did enjoy himself over Christmas.
Excellent, love to hear that.
But not in a crazy way. He likes his food, but he's very well controlled. Look, we have a specific window of time where we can get a lot of load in from a training point of view pre-season, and that's really January. When we get to the end of January, a lot of the factory stuff really kicks off, and a lot of the promotional work, a lot of the media work, a lot of the branding work. So the time that we have to dedicate to training while still managing his energy balance starts to dwindle quite a lot up until that first test and first race. So we've got a lot of work in January. And with that, his energy is low, but from a fitness point of view, he's had a big hit for about 3 weeks. He's generally always in a good place. Like when I say he enjoyed himself over Christmas, he came back 1.5 kilos heavier. And, we did a 2-week training camp in LA. And by the end of the camp, I would arguably say he was a little bit underweight. So they're the margins we sit around. So he's an easy guy to manage in terms of certainly the weight side, and he's one of the young generation of drivers who makes a direct correlation between his physical fitness and how he turns up physically to it contributing to a more positive outcome from a performance perspective. So from that point of view, I've got the buy-in. So he's in pretty good shape right now. What we generally try and do is put a little bit of mass on him, so he will look a little bit bigger, but that's generally bulk.
So, like, I'm conscious, probably people listening, right, who don't follow F1, right? So, fitness level, like, people are probably thinking, well, they're sitting in the car driving in circles. Like, how fit do they be, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's insane. So, like, if like 1 kilo in a difference in weight results basically in lost time. So for him, when you're saying that, like, he's probably a little bit underweight or whatever, there's obviously the team probably have a way for him, do they? That they're saying this is your
absolutely. Yeah. So look, our engineers need to have a really good read on his weight across a race weekend. So, I spend a lot of time predicting weights for engineers. So they'll say, what do you predict his weight at the end of practice one? Certainly, what's his predicted end of weight of quali, and then what's his predicted end of weight of race. When we're traveling, every morning I take his osmo, so I measure his urine for hydration levels, and I take his body weight. And once I have those two reads, I can be within 250 grams of his weight, knowing what the environment conditions are going to be like, and knowing how his appetite's been, and knowing the physicality of the track. We can be really, really close on weight. Now, from that perspective, you're right. That is about, certainly from a qualifying perspective, every half kilo and a kilo is time in the car. Overall, the drivers from a FIA perspective need to be 80 kilos or under in kit with their seat. And after that, the teams start to get penalized with extra weight in the car. So there is a requirement for it. It is a weight making sport.
Yeah.
It's not in terms of boxing or jockeys, etc. But there is a clear requirement for him to be a certain weight. And when we know he's, we try and start the season around 74.5, because I know over across the season he'll lose at least 1.5 kilos just by virtue of not having the time to train as much as we'd like, and get after the type of training that we'd like to keep that muscle mass on. So he will lose and strip out. So it becomes a little bit easier by the end of the season. But when like I said, there's kind of two considerations. One is how he turns up on a race weekend in terms of the overall weight requirement, but also then from a strategic point of view and time in the car, knowing how his weight's going to be, so that the engineers have a clearer read of what the car is going to weigh by the end of sessions.
So the other thing then is, and you've mentioned like muscle mass and whatever there, and I'm saying this now as somebody who wants strained their neck on the waltzers, right? The G-force that these lads go through, the muscles in their neck have to be like ridiculous. There's lads in F1 who probably have stronger necks than fellas have stronger arms in the gym. Like,
I mean, look, we do all our preseason testing, and we did it out in the States. So if you think, so it's called a brake test, basically increase the load until he can't hold that load anymore. His side flexions left and right were 76 kilos, 78 kilos, and his extension, which is his braking, was 83 kilos. So his brake test on his neck extension was more than most people's 1RM bench. And that's just nature. So if you take a sequence of corners at Silverstone through Magus and Beckett's.
Yeah.
So there's 4 corners through there, really high speed corners. You don't really take your foot off. One sequence through there is about 140 kilos on the neck. And that's just one sequence of 4 corners on a full track, one lap. And he might do 120, 130 laps a race weekend. So there is a strength requirement. Now, obviously, the only time we would be hitting anything close to those levels of kilos are high G incidences, which we hope don't happen very often. So we obviously get a good read of where his maxes are, but then we can extrapolate some of his endurance capacity from that, and we test his endurance capacity as well. So it's more about his ability to be able to withstand repeated loads across a race weekend. Now, being being upfront and honest about, and me and Alex talk about this, what we're really doing in preseason is getting him ready for test so that the pain of test is minimized. Because once he's had 3 or 4 days in the car, then his car conditioning takes over. And that's what really gets him ready for race weekend. So you're kind of existing in that space before he gets in the car, before he gets into a race weekend. And you're really just preparing him for that first couple of days of testing.
During a race weekend, like what type of calories are you thinking that he's losing?
Oh, you know what? A big issue of ours is actually getting enough calories into him across a race weekend. In a race, he's definitely doing 5,000-6,000 calories at least, more maybe. If there's some environmental conditions, the track temperature in Hungary last year was 56 degrees. Now he's sitting in 3 layers of fire retardant kit, balaclava, helmet, gloves. He's sitting on a seat which is pretty much on the engine. He's got, again, it's measured out, but anything between half a litre and a litre of fluid to drink for that entire race. So, the calorie load is huge. In Singapore, he can lose anything up to 3 kilos in a race. And that's muscle glycogen and hydration. So we talk about fitness levels. There's a huge endurance capacity cardiovascularly. There's the anaerobic capacity that you need because your heart rate exists at high levels for extended periods of time. There's the strength element for sure. But then there's just the ability to withstand the environmental conditions, which is generally the heat. And it's at those latter stages of races where, the car is probably at its worst in terms of tire condition. Your fatigue is setting in. You're coming down to, hopefully a point in the race where you're making decisions that get you into the points or out of the points. And it's where your cognitive function needs to be at its highest. And it's actually when you're at your most depleted. So we build a lot of his physical capacity so that in those latter stages of races, his physical conditioning is not affecting his decision-making or his technical performance. So you're trying to create the platform whereby actually his mind and his technical ability are not impeded by how he turns up physiologically.
It's bananas.
My ignorance in all of this, I would never have thought the level of, but I just wouldn't have thought any of that.
Yeah,
it's like an endurance athlete in a way, I suppose. Is it?
Absolutely.
It's bananas.
And
if I'm on the N7, sorry, Brad. I was just going to say,
no,
I'm on the N7 and it's a bit warm. I'm reaching for the aircon. The window's going down. I'm gasping for a sip of me water. These lads are just, it's mad. Like.
Yeah, and I think what when you look at a lot of sports, particularly say take Olympic-based sports, where there's generally one biomotor physical performance that determines whether you're successful or not. Okay, so one element of physical fitness, you need to be very good at that. So sprinters don't run marathons, marathon runners don't run sprints, etc. So what you've got in a driver is somebody who needs a really large aerobic capacity because they exist in the car for extended periods across a race weekend. Like I talked about already, they need a really strong anaerobic capacity because their heart rate exists 170 plus for extended periods through qualifying and through a race. You need to be strong physically to be able to withstand the G forces, but also you need to have good muscular endurance capacity to be able to repeat those strengths over and over again across a race weekend. And then you need the capacity to be able to withstand 40-degree temperatures, 50-degree temperatures for extended periods of time, and to still make good decisions cognitively while being able to react with speed and with precision and with excellent memory recall. So there's huge technical elements to it, but there's also massive elements of aerobic, anaerobic, and muscular strength capacities that you need to have just as your foundation to perform. You see them, you'll see it in testing when the pads come out and the foam pads go in. It's because even just from a neck point of view, being out of the car for 8 weeks, their neck deconditions so much that they need a little bit of support for those first couple of days. Alex is not allowed to use those.
You're a strict taskmaster, because I remember was it Nico Hulkenberg filling in? I can't remember who he's filling in for exactly, but his biggest problem
Lance, was it?
I think it might have been actually, and that's I remember that's what you were saying. The biggest problem was his neck, because just like that, being in the car for that long. we'll go on tangents and we'll go on waves here. But I'm just curious, then, as well, because I mean, you're from Laois originally, so
Yes.
did you ever have like an interest in F1? Did you ever have an interest in getting into anything? Because there's not even a go-kart track down here, man. Do you know what I mean? So it's quite the jump.
And you know what? I still don't. I'm joking. Like a lot of people probably, watched the first 3 or 4 laps of a race when it was on terrestrial TV just to see what had happened, and then after 3 or 4 laps, went on to the football.
That's me.
and that's as much as my interest existed in it, and right up until the point where I got a gig in Formula 2. That was my level of interest and knowledge. Obviously, I knew who some of the drivers were, and etc. But I wasn't an avid follower of it. I think what Formula One, and a caveat to that is I've always moved sports in my role, and that's what's really kept what I do fresh. Certainly from a learning point of view in terms of the technical, but also understand the physiology of different sports. Once you understand the physiology, then putting the plan in place to get them to that point where they can compete at the top level is something that really drives my passion and keeps it fresh for me. So I've never been afraid to move sports. I've always looked at every opportunity for its merit and thought, okay, is there an opportunity to learn something different here? So that didn't scare me. And I was at Arsenal at the time, and I'd actually been approached by Michael Conlon and Paul Dunn. So I had been working with an individual boxer and an individual golfer, and I come from a lot of squad-based sports. And actually what I was really enjoying was the opportunity to work one-on-one with one individual and not just be patching somebody up week on, week off just to get onto the pitch for the next game. We were sitting down and going, well, how do we actually make you better at what you do? What are the gaps between you and the top people in your game right now? And how do we fill those gaps? And that's what really excited me. And I finished my master's in strength and conditioning. I'm a chartered physiotherapist to start off with. And just really randomly, someone slid into my DMs on Twitter. And basically this guy who I didn't know at the time, who had been previously the head of the UK Strength and Conditioning Association, was working with a company called Hints of Performance. And he put out a tweet saying, looking for physios with experience in elite sport with S&C qualifications. I had gotten on really well with 2 of my lecturers in my S&C masters. They both knew this guy, tweeted him back saying, tag me in it, speak to this guy. He's Olympic experience, blah, blah, blah. So dropped me a DM and just said, look, I don't know what your work situation right now is, but I've got some interesting roles working with individual athletes if you'd be keen to apply. So I was like, right, happy to have a conversation. He kind of said, well, actually, the interviews are starting this week. It's basically a case of just interviewing, and then we'll kind of tell you at the end what you're interviewing for. I was like, is this some sort of scam? I mean, if he starts asking for my bank details, I'm gone. But did 4 rounds of really intense interviews. And then at the last interview, they just said, look, there's a level of confidentiality because we supply coaches to Formula 1, Formula 2 drivers, and we'd love you to come on board with one of our drivers when the right role comes up. They offered me a gig in Formula 1 maybe 2 weeks later, and the unique caveat to it was that I would have to give up my work with Mick and Paul at the time, and I was really enjoying that, and I committed to the season with them. I said, look, it just doesn't fit. And they said, no problem, we appreciate your honesty. Came back to me maybe 4 weeks later, and they had a job with a Formula 2 driver, Tadasuka Makino, who was a Japanese driver and was on the Honda Dream project. He'd gotten a seat in Formula 2, and it was half the races, so half the travel, less time commitment, so more opportunity to keep the stuff running on simultaneously with Mick and Paul. So yeah, took it on. Didn't have a clue. Learned quickly, which I've always been able to do. And had a really good year with Tada. He moved back to Japan to do Super Formula and Super GT. And actually that happened to be Alex's Formula 2 year. So him, Lando and George were fighting for the championship into the last race. And Alex got the call to go to Toro Rosso that summer. And he had no trainer. And I'd kind of gotten to know him and his family across that season. And he dropped me a call and said, would you be interested in working together, moving to Toro Rosso? We sat and we had a conversation about our philosophies of life and performance and what that looked like, and I guess how we wanted to represent ourselves in that kind of world, and whether our values fitted together. And it did. And we've been working together for 5 years now, and I'd say the relationship is as strong as ever.
Amazing, man. It's
and that's it. Just opportunity, like I said, just being open to opportunities and having conversations.
What's the transition like when you're working at Arsenal with a team to individual sports people? What's the transition like with that?
It's a really good question. It's getting your head around the level of responsibility, because I went from being, okay, a physiotherapist with other skills at Arsenal to suddenly working with Alex and being everything. Yeah. And, my family and my wife laugh when they hear about some of the stuff I need to deal with when I'm working with Alex. And it's, I'm a physio. I'm a strength and conditioning coach. And I've since then realized the level of, I guess, the importance of being able to execute mentally in those environments. And I've gone back and done my mental performance coaching qualifications. So I'm a mental performance coach, but I'm also a friend, and I'm a shoulder to cry on, and I help manage his family, and I help manage some of his PR commitments and his media commitments. And I'm a gatekeeper for some of that when it comes from the team. And he says, can you bounce that back for me? And I fight his corner when it needs to be fought, but also I challenge him when he needs to be challenged. And I'm folding his laundry, and I'm making sure he's up out of bed in the morning on time, and making sure he's got his suitcase. I joke, but I'm an au pair for an adult. So I think it was what changed, certainly from a skills point of view, was how broad the role actually was. But then from a human element, it was building a lot stronger of a relationship, because the intensity of the relationship demanded that. But also because the level of intensity in terms of his learning curve, and I guess the strategies he used emotionally when he stepped into Formula One, and being able to challenge those strategies across the last 3 or 4 years, not just in terms of his ability to perform at his highest level in that environment and manage the demands and the stress and the pressure and everything else that goes with that in terms of the public scrutiny, but just for him to be a happier, healthier individual. And the intensity of relationship that needs to have to be able to challenge those in a really open and honest way, to be able to help him to develop as an individual. And I'll say this with anybody that I meet, first and foremost, in terms of people contacting me to work with them, I said, I'm here to develop individuals. The sport is secondary, because happy, healthy individuals perform well. The physical stuff is so easy. I mean, if you've got somebody who's motivated and connected to the physical work, and they're not afraid of that stuff is so easy. The winning elements are, how can you handle this environment? How do you make those decisions that mean success or failure? And are you comfortable being uncomfortable and looking at those failures and being really open and honest with yourself and being asked really difficult questions about how can you do that better? And is that just the execution of tasks, or is there something in the way here? Is there a barrier that you've got from your childhood or from your adolescence, or a strategy that you use that is just not working right now? And do you have the balls to be able to change that, and to be able to really look at yourself and say, that doesn't work for me right now, and I know where that comes from. Let's deal with that so that I can deal with the present.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. And
I had Patrick, when I was on a fast track program for the Rio Paralympic Games in Paralympic powerlifting.
Amazing.
Yeah, I had access to a sports psychologist throughout the qualifying and stuff like that. And like what you were saying there, I resonated in the sense that once you're making a happy athlete a happy person, their performance is going to be better. And it's just the benefits of, lack of funding, obviously, which is a different conversation with Paralympics levels. But I went from doing my own thing to having access to other resources, and the level, the changes in performance is overnight, like.
Yeah, and look, we can talk about that in terms of, I've gone to 2 Olympic Games as a lead physio for Team GB, and I was full-time at the EIS for 5.5 years. And call it what you like, sports washing or whatever. But the system that the UK have set up around their athletes in terms of access to every type of practitioner that individual athlete might need to be successful is absolutely incredible. So the structure helps to create the athletes that are successful at games. And you go and you watch the games, and Team GB are knocking gold medals, silver medals, bronze medals out of the park. But how many athletes do we in Ireland miss because there's just that one little element of performance that we're not nailing because they don't have the expertise there to support them in that growth area. And you have to cast the net wide, and you have to create a system whereby you take in a certain number of athletes, because there's only a certain few of those that will actually make it. But certainly in Ireland, I feel like we're either waiting for this gem of success and then we jump on board and we support that one individual, or for whatever reason, and probably not to do with the Irish Institute of Sport or the Irish Olympic Committee, a hub develops of high performance, and then we support that. We're not creating the hubs. We're not
reactive
creating the
though,
access.
isn't it? Instead of being proactive.
100%.
And you can see that
Absolutely.
with the boxing, like the success of the boxing, it always seems to happen as a reactionary thing. Like even our own local boxing club has recently 2 elite boxing championships, and Jack Marley and Sean Murray, and then they went back to their boxing club 2 days later, and bureaucracy has closed down their boxing club. Those little things, when you've just won a national championship on your road to Paris for the Olympic Games, and bureaucracy is shutting down your facility to where you train, that can knock you. That can knock your psychology for a week or two. Whatever. Like, you shouldn't have to be dealing with that nonsense.
And there's incredible people in boxing like John Conlon, like the people who've gone before him, who are creating the structure for these athletes to be successful. So that's a well-established system. But are there any other systems in Ireland that produce the same level of athlete that are as well formed and well designed as that? I'm not sure, and I'm obviously making some assumptions here because I haven't worked in the Irish system for a very, very long time. But I certainly think, like anything, you have to invest heavily to get the outcome. It's not rocket science, and one of the reasons why I moved with Alex was, we laughed about it already. I didn't necessarily have an interest in Formula One, but it's one of the sports where the budget is there to create a position where I can have that time with a young individual to help him on that journey. And the Alex that I'm working with right now is so far from the Alex that moved to Toro Rosso 5 years ago. And not in he was anything negative about Alex right then, but he was just a really young, immature 22-year-old who had some incredible life experience. So in some ways was very mature, but had all of these strategies that he was using from his past. Just happened to be an incredibly talented driver who was so unbelievably driven to be successful. There's 2 or 3 people in my career. Liam Heath, who is Olympic champion, 5-time world champion, has got 4 Olympic medals in his career, 1 gold. Michael Conlon and Alex, they're up there. There's just this level of work ethic, and he had that. But he was in his own way at times. And they were the strategies that we need to work through. And that stuff isn't in the gym. That stuff isn't on the track. That stuff is in the hotel room after something's gone really wrong. And we're saying, how do we deal with this? What do we need to do the next time to make sure that we're not sitting in this hotel room at 11:30 at night trying to work through it? And, the time that I spend with him is the reason, partly for his development, partly is his openness and willingness to be, like we talked about, being uncomfortable and being asked difficult questions, and his awareness of himself. And he's a really emotionally astute guy. And we've got to the point now where he asks me questions, which is phenomenal. And he'll ask some really insightful questions, or he'll bring up a really difficult topic, and we'll talk about it for 3 or 4 hours on a car journey or on a flight or in a coffee shop. And that's his level of maturity now. And it's no, the Alex got that promoted to Red Bull 12 races into his rookie career, if the Alex now stepped into that seat, he'd still be in it right now. And that's the learning of him. It was promotion before he had the strategies to deal with that environment. Nothing to do with the technical.
Absolutely. He's one of the most talented drivers on the grid, and there's no denying that. And I think, 99% of F1 fans were thrilled to see him back in the sport last season after the kind of year out, But I'm curious if I can ask kind of a question towards you, Patrick, in terms of, you touched on it there, like you've been to Olympics, you've worked at Arsenal, boxers, F1, all that kind of stuff. But like for you, in terms of how you're managing the situation or what's going through your head, rather it's, walking down the tunnel at the Emirates ahead of a match and what you're thinking about the guys you've been working with there, Alex getting into the car before the lights go green, or walking out Madison Square Garden with Mick Conlon. For you, the mental preparation for you in terms of what you need to do for your guy, how different is that for you?
It's for me, it's always been about knowing what that environment needs from you in that moment. And that comes from really knowing what your athlete needs from you in those moments. And that comes from experience, that comes from awareness, that comes from me working through a lot of my own stuff, and doing that. I've had my own mental performance coach for the last 6 years. I still work with him now. And we've gone through a lot of difficult stuff that I've been carrying around with me. And his point to me was, how can you expect to show up for somebody else when you're not showing up for yourself? So I've been on a journey myself. So it's really about putting all of that together and knowing what that environment needs. Sometimes with Alex and sometimes with me, that environment needs my energy. So I'll bring a little bit of energy to it, whether that's just talking rubbish about something, or bringing something funny into the conversation, or triggering something that I know is a happiness for them, and then having a little chat about that and lifting that mood a little bit. And sometimes I just don't need to touch it. Sometimes I just need to stand in the corner and shut my mouth. And they might look at me every now and again, and you just give a little nod, being like, yeah, that's good. Like, we're ready. I don't need to be involved here. On the grid with Alex, there's times I can see, not so much anymore, he's very good now, but certainly at the start, where I could see him going back into his own mind and running through processes. And Alex is a natural driver. He's a field driver. Everything that Alex does is because he's just so in tune with the car and the track. He's incredible in those moments. So the more conscious he becomes, the less unconscious he is. And he's stepping away from where his strengths are. So there's times on the grid where, I can see that happening, and he's going quiet, and I can see by his eyes. So I'll go over and I'll break that. And, there's been times where after races, engineers have come up to me and been like, what were you two talking about on the grid before we got in the car? And I'm like, just rubbish. Like, I can't even say on the podcast some of the stuff we talk about. But I need to bring him back to now. He's gone from me there. And the last thing we need is him getting into the car, really consciously going through things, checking boxes. Done. We're here, we're on the grid, put your helmet on, let's go. We've run through all the visualization work. It's all in there. So get out of your own way. Let's just access all of that natural stuff that we know is your strength. And we talk a lot about that, about being present and finding his flow state. And a really strong part of his flow state is his presence. Here, now, not 2 laps forward, not 2 races before. It's about this second, this moment. That's what changes this race. So we need to access that. So like I said, it's really about being for them in the space that they need right in that moment. But I also have a really good understanding of what I need each day to turn up for them. And we talked about that a little bit. I need exercise, I need some good sleep, and I need my own space. And actually both, and what works for me and Alex is we're both actually introverts by nature. So I get my energy from being on my own, and so does he. And we spend a lot of time together, but we both know that there's parts of the race weekend where we just need to be away from each other, and actually just need to be away from other people. And for me, that's generally the hour in the gym in the morning, whether the hotel gym is absolutely rubbish or not. Just getting down there, or getting out for a run, or just and I'll meet you for breakfast. And I've had conversations where we've, say, been in a team hotel, and just by virtue of people being friendly and being nice, and I've got my earphones in, but they're coming up to me in the morning. I'm like, this is my time. I'll speak to you at breakfast or I'll speak to you at the track. Because this space, this right now is my preparation for the next 12 hours. And if I need that energy for the race day, then this is me preparing. But on top of that are all the really obvious stuff, like I need to sleep well and I need to eat well and I need to be hydrated. I need to travel well, so I need to stick to my jet lag plan, and I need to do all those things that I know creates the environment for me to be able to perform for them. So there's two elements. Like I said, there's knowing what they need, but also knowing what I need and executing on both of that. I see it so often, young practitioners, inexperienced practitioners being in a room and not understanding what that room needs.
Yeah.
And that can actually be a really destructive thing. And I've had athletes before coming up to me going, oh, what's that guy doing here? Like, really pisses me off. And I'm like, in this moment where you're just about to go and compete, your attention now is towards an energy in the room that you don't like, because that person is drawing that attention there. Energy flows where attention goes. Now your attention is not on performance. And that can be really destructive in that environment. And as a young practitioner, you really got to be aware of how you turn up in these spaces. And it's always better to be quiet than loud.
Yeah. You mentioned there the jet lag, and we sort of touched on the travel at the start of it. But like, how much of an impact does that have on you as well, then? Because obviously you're saying you're spending more time with Alex, your own family and everything else, to traveling. Like, geez, even the first race of the season in Australia. Is it Bahrain testing, then over to Australia?
Well, we go Bahrain test, Bahrain race, Saudi Arabia race, and Australia race.
Sorry, Australia's.
And now in the F1 wisdom, instead of just making that a triple header because you're already halfway there, they put a week in between each.
Yeah.
So, I'll go Bahrain test race back, Saudi back, Australia back. Jesus. Insane. But yeah.
Wow. Like back home.
Yeah, back to London, yeah.
Wow.
It's
Are you in London now, Patrick?
Yeah, I've been in London for about 13 years now.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not home, but it's where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's heavy travel though, isn't it?
It is, but the reality of it is, one, if you travel well, it's doable. And if you understand what your body needs from a jet lag point of view, it's very, very doable. But if you don't, then, I'll do the 2 weeks around Bahrain and I'll come home. If I don't do that 2-week trip turns into a 6-week trip. And that's a huge chunk of time to be away. That's a month and a half out of 12 months to be away straight off the bat, first 3 races. Yeah. So while the travel sounds hectic, honestly, if a flight isn't over 10 hours now, it doesn't even register. It's like getting on an hour flight back to Dublin.
Wow.
Honestly, just doesn't even register in terms of the actual travel of it or the impact on my body.
Yeah.
It's easier to travel west than it is to travel east because it's a phase short and you just have to stay awake a bit longer. Sorry, phase delay. When you're going east, it's a phase short and it's a lot more difficult to get your circadian rhythm in line. So traveling bigger distances east is a lot more difficult anyway. But I'd rather be tired at home for 2 days than be sitting in a hotel in Saudi for an extra 2 days.
Yeah.
Are there any races on the calendar that you see and you go, oh Jesus, no, just don't want to go there?
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that before the calendar even starts.
Fair enough, yeah.
Because they're generally not the countries you want to be discerning about.
Yeah.
One of the questions.
Yeah, but Schnaudi, Namibia.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Neither do I.
Your microphone cracked up there, Mero.
Yeah, sorry.
One of the questions we always ask when we get athletes or trainers or whoever on is around what their go-to cheat meal is. Not for any particular reason other than me and Mero like to indulge ourselves. So, like, if you were, let's say you've been away for 3 weeks or whatever, and you're coming home and you're like, oh, I'm giving myself a bit of a day off here. What's your go-to?
Yeah, I love Japanese food, but where I live in London, is an area called Tooting, and it's like 80% Indian and Pakistani. So the Indian and Pakistani food here is insane. So like a good old curry is hard to beat. So yeah, I actually had some family over the weekend, and we took them to our favorite curry restaurant, Indian restaurant here, and just so good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I am devastatingly, our favorite Japanese closed down recently, and they did a katsu curry that was
Oh,
like my crystal meth.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I love katsu curry.
yeah,
I love
man.
Yeah.
sushi as well.
So yeah, sushi. Yeah, yeah. So that would probably be a good curry. I mean,
Nice. Yeah.
it's yeah,
What
it's
would
hard to
Alex's
beat.
cheat meal be?
Alex likes his food as well. Pizza. He's a nice thin crust pizza man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say
Um.
after a race that because you lose so much calories that just load of pizzas into them.
Yeah. Look, we have that conversation, and especially across race weekends. Because it's probably one of the things that we struggle with in terms of him getting enough calories on board across the race weekend, just because his appetite kind of disappears. So there's times where I'll be like, look, you can kind of have whatever you want here. It's got us in trouble before, but there's this perception that drivers on a race weekend should be eating nothing, only lettuce and
Yeah. Yeah.
berries, and I'm like, no, have a couple of hash browns with your scrambled eggs, or
I love a
have
hash
a couple
brown.
of sausages, or yeah, I mean, Franz Tost from Toro Rosso, now
Yeah.
AlphaTauri, does not like hash browns and told me so
Either do I.
on Alex's breakfast. That was many years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but at that stage, there is an element of he just needs fuel in his body.
Yeah.
Now he's not out getting a large Mackey's meal, but there's times where we just need some calories. So if there's an apple pie for dessert with some custard, knock yourself out.
My favorite.
Um,
I was gonna say that's right up
yeah,
there now, isn't it?
I think that's probably why I went straight to that. It's one of mine as well. And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have a sweet tooth. I'm savory over sweet, but yeah, it's
Oh,
hard to
it's like
beat.
over
Yeah.
savory.
I think it was
Yeah,
Kimi Räikkönen used to be mad for the ice cream. There was somebody who used to just
there
they
was
had
lots
an
of
ice
things
cream machine.
Kimmy was mad for.
Yeah. The Mick Conlon connection, and
Yeah,
you were part of the Madison Square Garden um fight and everything. Like, what was that experience like in general for you? Was that what was
as
Finn
in his
Balor was
Nikitan
part of
fight.
the walkout, wasn't he? As well.
What's that?
Was Finn Balor walked out with him as well at that one, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and subsequently got to know Finn quite well. He was at the race in Mexico this year. Really lovely guy. I mean,
Gentleman.
his
Absolute
his
gentleman.
story is incredible.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Like,
we've had him on the
we
podcast
talk
a
about,
couple of times. Yeah, he's a gent.
yeah, just like going out to Japan to wrestle just because it was what he loved, and
Yeah.
like
Did you
just
see the
phenomenal.
RT documentary about him, Patrick?
Is there one? Yeah,
There was an RT documentary about him a few years ago before he made it in the
right.
WWE.
See if I can dig it out.
Might be on the RT player, and it documents his time in Japan. It's just before he signs to New York.
Right.
It's just brilliant, but he's such a decent, nice skin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unbelievable. Just one of the most grounded,
yeah,
unassuming, humble guys I've ever met. And
yeah,
just
absolutely.
really, just a really genuine, nice guy.
The first time we
Yeah.
interviewed him, Patrick, we interviewed him on New Year's Day, in person, and I had to pick him up in my Ford Focus, in his man dad's gaff in Bray. It was surreal.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
sitting in the car at the traffic lights. All right, how are you, bud?
And he's huge in
Yeah.
WWE at the minute.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it's merchandise and
Yeah.
all out the door. But he's a bad guy now. So I was texting him
Yeah.
enough, and he was saying that he's loving his new role. Absolutely in love.
Yeah. The demon.
Yeah, he's
No,
an eight pack, not a six pack.
yeah. He's in good shape, to be fair. And I loved. I only just saw a clip of it on his Instagram about his walkout, and he chose to do the LGBTQ
That's right,
plus
yeah.
walkout instead of the demon.
In Saudi
And
Arabia.
it's
Was it? Oh no,
weird.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, and it was like that triggered something for me, which was, and when we talk about sport, you know, and when I'm having these really difficult conversations with Alex about life and the impact of sport on life, and actually how fundamentally it's just about being happy. And it's like, you just happen to be good at doing something that people like to watch. But what's your impact going to be on the world? Like, what's your impact going to be in terms of not even the world, because that's too big. You know, what kind of brother are you going to be? What kind of dad are you going to be? What kind of son are you going to be? Because in 40 years' time, that's going to be a hell of a lot more important than you've won a couple of races in Formula One 40 years ago and nobody remembers who you are. Because real development is about yourself. And just to see somebody, you know, knowing his story and having that connection in terms of just knowing how nice a guy he is. And just for him to be, you know, probably the biggest moment in his career at that stage, and knowing, you know, all those years in Japan on these small shows, or, you know, all those years to get to where he is right now, and choosing to use that moment for somebody else
Yeah.
just actually quite triggered me. It was a really powerful little clip, and messaged him straight away. I was like, wow, like that's what being an athlete with influence is all about.
Absolutely.
You know, yeah, it's always incredible.
Yeah. He's so humble, like so humble.
Yeah.
Patrick, we're running out of time with it, but before we let
No
you go,
stress.
just in terms of kind of conversation, because the mental aspect of it is something that stood out in kind of what we're talking about with you today. And I'd be curious in terms of, you kind of gave us an insight into the physical preparation, everything you're doing with Alex pre-season. But looking at the season ahead, then mentally speaking, how do you try get in the zone, and how do you figure, like, right, season ahead, here's our goals, here's what we're going to do, and build.
Yeah. Look, it's a little bit fluid because there's a huge unknown, which is, where is the car going to be at this year?
Yeah.
And there was a real shift in mentality last year, which actually was quite positive in terms of how we reframed it. But the one thing that the Formula One format allows is for you to create success no matter where you are on the grid. So qualifying is a huge opportunity, and what went from being in the top 3 in quali now is, we get out Q1, that's a good weekend.
Yeah.
We get close to the top of Q2 or into Q3, that's a mega weekend. And when we were at Red Bull, it was really, each session was building towards the race, and the race was the pinnacle of the race weekend. What we do now at Williams is, we need to take each session in isolation, because there's some sessions that are going to be good and there's some sessions that just aren't going to work for us. So when we say, right, we got our Q1, we got the top end of Q2, race didn't necessarily go our way, that's a good weekend. You executed on quali. Okay, we did everything that we could in the race. What could we have done different? Let's analyze that. Sometimes there's just nothing, and then that's okay. That's a good weekend, right? There's race weekends where we don't get out Q1, the race is, you know, not great. We're thinking, right, was that us? What is within our control? What can we do differently? Or maybe there's conversations you need to have with engineers. What are those conversations? How do we tee those up? So the shift changes. And what Alex needs to do now is learn to be more of a leader. He needs to lead the team. And then there's race weekends where we'll do well in quali and he'll sneak into the points, and that's a mega weekend. You know, so when we were at Red Bull, if we finished P9, the world was falling apart around us. Not from our perspective, but from everyone else. Now we finish P9 and it's like, right, get the champers out. But we're not outcome focused. For us, it's about delivery of what's in your control. So, you know, there's a couple of times this year, we laugh about it. Where was the last one? Oh, like, you know, without being too blatantly obvious, that wasn't the best Williams car that has ever been produced. It was a tricky, difficult, not so quick car this year. Some of the things he did in that car this year left me like jaw on the floor stuff. There was a quali recently where he missed out on Q3 by maybe 2 or 3 hundredths. And we were going into the race weekend going, this is going to be tough. Like, this track really doesn't suit the style of car we've got. And he just pulls out this performance. And he came back into the garage, and we've got out because we've got to go to the FIA to get weighed. And the garage is pretty flat because we missed out on Q3 by 2 or 3 hundredths, which is fine. And I'm just laughing, going, I have no idea how you've just done that. And he's like, I can see him chuckling in his helmet and I can see his eyes. I know he's laughing. And he kind of took his helmet off and he was like, somebody died in here. And I was like, I don't know, mate, but that was incredible. And he was like, yeah, I was really happy with that.
Yeah.
And that's us. We know what success looks like. So we can tune into that. And there's times he'll get out of the car and he'll have missed out on Q3 and he'll have gone, I dropped some time there. Okay, let's chat about that later. And it won't be so happy because he knows there was more there.
Yeah.
So that's the performance element. It's so for us, it's about execution and taking the wins where we can take them from. We don't predict anything. We don't try and predict anything. That's just scoreboard pressure. That just gets in the way of you being present. And certainly in qualifying, even down to, a lot of the drivers will have a delta on their steering wheel, which tells them whether they're up and down on the required time or their quickest time. And we took that off his steering wheel. Because the second he started looking at his delta, the second he wasn't driving the car for field, it was him thinking about what he'd just lost in the last corner or what he was up with 2 corners to go. And then you're not present anymore. And that was one of the biggest shifts in terms of his delivery in qualifying was him just being able to be in the car in that moment and going by feel.
Brilliant. Love it. Will your head make an appearance in Drive to Survive this year?
Strangely, they didn't do a lot of it this year. So I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't think so. I mean, I felt like at Red Bull we were mic'd up every race weekend, but this year I can't even remember doing anything really with them. So, and that's fine by me.
Was that strange for you when that kind of, because you kind of made an appearance in it and suddenly there was, I remember just on social media, everyone kind of reacting to, there's an Irish fella in Formula One.
Yeah. I mean, there is in that, I have no interest in that side of things.
Yeah.
Like, it couldn't be anything further from where I sit in terms of my values.
Was it a distraction overall? Like,
it was at times, but they were very good at that point about me just going, this is not for you, and shutting the door. And we were mic'd up all the time, but if they didn't have video footage and mic, they couldn't use it. And if you had a conversation and you were like, oh crap, I've got my mic on, you could just say that's not for edit, and it didn't go in. And generally the teams got a look at what the episodes were going to look like, so they could challenge things if it was something that they were not happy to go in. But it is bizarre, and naturally they're creating stories, so things get put in places that may not necessarily be the chronological order, and it's the EastEnders of sport. What or Fair City, if you want to be geographically correct.
Keep it local,
yeah, absolutely. I think what you cannot underestimate, and certainly from our perspective, is the impact it's had in terms of new fans coming to Formula One, and the difference in the fans and the difference in the intensity of the fans. Insane. I mean, before you get obviously fans, but fans who are more like petrol heads or engineering nerds and just love the technical side of it, and had a bit of a relationship in terms of I follow that driver, but it was more about the teams.
Yeah.
And then Drive to Survive happened. And I remember last year we were in Budapest. And actually, funny enough, he was going to the Four Seasons to do an interview for Drive to Survive. But we were staying at a different hotel. We went down into the car park, and weirdly there, the elevator brings you up outside the hotel. There must have been 1,000 people in a U shape around the hotel entrance. And we had come up behind them, so nobody had seen us. And I was like, there's a gap here. I said, you just need to run. And he sprinted. And when people saw him, it was like he was a member of the Beatles. It was just screaming, like fanboy screaming.
Yeah.
And it was just this weird, and that was probably the real change for me in terms of, this is different. This is really different. And the level of, I guess, like reality TV stars, there's accounts following his relationship, and there's accounts for this, and there's accounts, and it's just that level of scrutiny and the intensity of it's very different. And people who might, and a complete opposite, who don't know a lot about the technical, but just love the drivers and the relationships with each other and the relationships with their families. And we were in LA, and for every 10 people that recognized him, 8 people were saying, "Oh, you're that guy from that show." He's like, "No, I'm a Formula One driver." But that's the ship. Now, look, it has its pros and it has its cons. It's obviously very good for the sport and the exposure and brands and promotion. And, these are expensive cars to run. So that brings money for the team and opportunities for Alex. The difficulty for somebody like Alex who is an introvert, who finds that really exhausting, who from a human element, it just drains him. And we need to find strategies to be able to manage that, or we need to find reframes for his thought process around those interactions and having to do certain media appearances and turning up at the track and there's 100 fans waiting for you or 500 fans waiting for you. So we've done a lot of work around that, and he's in a better place now. But it's certainly for somebody like Alex, it's been a big shift in terms of what it takes from him and his energy reserve across the race weekend.
Absolutely, man. Brilliant. Patrick, if people want to follow your adventures as you globetrot and be Ric Flair around the world, where can they get it?
Where can they get it? The only social media I have is Instagram, and I have to check my tag. It's Patrick H_coach. That's it. Keep it minimalistic if I can.
That's it, man. But look, really appreciate you taking the time to chat to us. All the best to you and Alex for the season ahead. And look, hopefully we'll be chatting to you again sometime in the future as Alex moves along his career. And if you get back involved with Michael Conlon and the guys there, it'd be great to chat to you more about that as well. But for now, thanks so much, man, and all the best.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Big thanks to Patrick for that chat, man. That was fascinating.
Yeah, it was so interesting. I still, as I said, I can't get me head around the weight loss in the car over the course of a qualifying and actual race weekend is just bizarre to me. It's like insane. Even the calorie count, and it's just mental.
That's when he was talking about it, and he mentioned at one point how he has to predict, and he can predict within 250 grams what Alex's weight will be. And he's talking about in the morning, he weighs him, and then he does a urine, not a urine test. I can't remember exactly what he said. But I'm sitting there, I'm like, they must know to within a tiny amount, the amount of fluid he's going to take on board and all that. I do have palpitations now if I don't track my water in my fitness pal.
Yeah, but I'd love to have one of those testers where you wake up in the morning and it tells you how dehydrated or hydrated you are. I'd love to know that. I'd love to piss on something that says you need X amount of water today. I'd love that. Yeah.
I just judge it by the colour of me weight.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
and I'm like, that's a bit dark. I better drink a little bit extra today. Whereas these lads have it down to a science, man. It's amazing. It's the physical capabilities of those fellas it's bananas. But as you said, when he said that the Singapore Grand Prix, the humidity and everything else that they have to go through there, and he lost 3.5 kilo in one race. Jesus, that's something else. But yeah, great chat. Really enjoyed it, and we'll hopefully chat to Patrick again in the future about some of his other adventures and what he's up to and everything else. But a long season ahead with Alex in the F1. We wish them all the best with that. Merno.
Yes.
Can we leave it there for that episode?
We will indeed. It was a great episode. I got loads from it anyway. I'm not a huge F1 fan, so if you want to get any of our previous episodes, you can go to search, or you can go to WTSpod.com, or you can get us on Twitter at WTSpod, or you can go to any podcast provider and just simply search WTS Pod. We're on Podcast Republic, Podbean, Apple Podcast, anywhere and everywhere you get a podcast. Just put in WTS Pod. He's at Danjo Murray. I'm at Merrigan Mania. And until next time, clear eyes.
Full hearts.
Can't lose.